You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs Fan. Joining me as usual is good buddy Ricky Vaive, affectionately known as Squid. Squid, how's it going today?
I think I'll have that until they put me in a box. I would think, Mike. It's been so long, but I'm doing great. Good golf game today, 75. Hit it pretty good.
We're going to need that for the Sandbag Open with Bissonnette and Ryan Whitney.
Yeah, no problem. I got lots of those left in me.
Good. Well, let's not get too cocky, okay? Because it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So we don't want to get too cocky with these guys. So speaking of which, that's we had Biz as our guest last week, and he had so much to say. We could have talked to this guy for hours. We split it up into two parts. You're going to hear the second part of that today, and it's pretty funny. So when you listen to that, give us some feedback on what you think. We're also going to talk about, obviously, the play-in up and coming for the Toronto Maple Leafs against Columbus. Nick Robinson. We've got, who I think, our producer, who we're losing, Mr. Steven Ellis, going back to the Hockey News. But I call this kid, and I call him kid with the most affection you can find for a guy of that age, with the brilliance he has as far as young talent goes. He's a draft savant, I like to call him. So you're going to get a kick out of this guy, and his knowledge is unmatched, believe me, with the prospects coming up. And we want to tie that in with what we were talking about last week about teams getting pushed up against the cap that may have to make some unnecessary or unpopular moves. And we did mention, and by the way, folks, for a lot of the emails I got, I was not suggesting the Leafs trade Mitch Marner. I was just saying that at some point they could get back into a corner where they may have no choice. But again, we can carry on with all that. But before we go any further, Ricky, what did you think of the game the other night?
Well, I actually, believe it or not, I thought it was a lot more intense and a little bit quicker than I was expecting, especially after 4 months off, a 3 or 4 week training camp, and then one exhibition game. And it was a lot quicker and a lot better played than I was expecting.
Yeah, I was impressed with, the usual sort of idiosyncrasies the Leafs seem to have on defense did sort of find their rear ugly head as the game went on, but the offense looked sharp, obviously scoring in the first 40 seconds. Anybody in particular stand out in your eyes that seemed to catch your attention?
No, I wouldn't say anybody really stood out where you would say, well, wow, he was unbelievable tonight. I thought as a whole, believe it or not, I thought their defense moved the puck pretty good, got it out of their zone fairly quickly with good passes, and therefore the Leafs were able to go on the attack a lot of times. Other than that, I can't say I looked at the game and watched and said, this guy played unbelievable, because I didn't think anybody was unbelievable, but I didn't think anybody was terrible either. So it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I think both sides were a little apprehensive to start off with, especially with the light of everything going on. So you could see they were a little guarded. But when Muzzin steamrolled Alex Belzile, that just seemed to turn the whole game. And everybody didn't realize, wait a minute, COVID or no COVID, these guys are like, if I keep my head down or I'm not paying attention, I'm going to be board planted. And it just seemed to pick up from there. And I also thought that Mikheyev looked very comfortable. If I had to pick one player, I guess maybe him, because he fit in so comfortably with Tavares and Marner. Yeah. And the fact that those guys seem to have his confidence in them playing with them, and they made plays with them. And you can tell when you can speak to this because you went through it with new line mates. There is, believe it or not, a real adjustment, is there not, to pick up somebody new on your side?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that there's always an adjustment. And the other night, he seemed to fit in on that line kind of seamlessly, really. And but he's a big horse. He's a big kid. He's talented and he's smart and he knows where to go. There's a lot of guys on that 2-on-1 with Johnny. They may not have driven the net as hard as he did, but he knew there was probably a 90% chance he was getting the puck. And so there already you're seeing a little chemistry with a guy knowing that, okay, I got an opportunity here because, he's likely going to fake it. He's on his forehand, and he'll likely throw it across to me for a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, you could just see that. I mean, the play was read all the way down, and again, that's what I'm speaking of, the confidence that Tavares has in Mikheyev because he made that play. I mean, everybody watching this, we're watching on TV, it looks real simple, but at ice level, it's a little more difficult than what it makes out to be.
It is, but then, I don't think you have to look any further than last year where he was really coming around as a player with Toronto, and then all of a sudden with the bad wrist cuff that he sustained, and good for the Leafs, good for him that they've been off for 4 months. So he's been able to come back and play. He probably wouldn't have been ready for the playoffs more than likely. Maybe not played at all in the playoffs, but certainly he wouldn't have been available for the first round or two at least. And but I thought he was coming around pretty good last year, just before he got hurt. Thought he was steady, responsible. He could chip in offensively. He was good defensively, and he's a big body. And big bodies that can skate and make plays and that are smart players and responsible defensively, they're not easy to come by.
Yeah, and I mean, for a guy who's new to the league, he does not turn the puck over, and that's another big key component to his game that, again, gains the trust of the coaching staff and his fellow teammates. And speaking of which, kid wearing number 89, the guy who wore that number at one time was one of the most talented players ever to come play for the Maple Leafs. I was referring to Alex McGillney, of course, but Nick Robinson, he made his debut. This kid was just sort of on a one-way track to have a shot right from the start. He earned it. He seemed to gain the respect of the players. He gained respect of the room. He did not play his way off that hockey club the other night with his play and his tenacity up front forechecking. Made a nice play, picked up an assist. Do you think he plays Sunday night? It's a game they're going to be playing against with suffocating defense. Do you replace him with a guy like Gauthier, even though, he's a big body guy, but he does not use the big body to his advantage? Or do you use the speedster who does have a talent and actually can score?
Well, it's almost like you're caught between a rock and a hard place here, because if you're the coach, you're going, okay, it's a short series. If we get behind 2-0, chances of coming back are very, very slim. And I forget what the percentages are, but it's somewhere in the 90s. And so do you go with somebody who's played for a few years in the National Hockey League and has some playoff experience, or do you go with a kid who was really good in junior at Peterborough? So I don't think he played himself out of the lineup. I don't think he did a whole lot to secure himself a job. Like, in other words, like, he's definitely in. I don't know if he did one or the other. He was kind of just in the middle. And I thought I saw him take a couple of shots that probably in junior, based on his numbers, he's the type of player that probably would have had a little bit more patience, maybe held on, where he shot probably a little sooner than he probably wanted to. So those are all big questions going into best of 5 against a team that is very good defensively, and one of the best teams in the league, as a matter of fact, defensively. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough call, because they're not going to be dressing 13 forwards either. Don't forget.
That's
You're
right.
going to go back to the usual, 12, 6, and 2, and do you use a guy without any experience? I'm not really sure. If there was a way that they could fit him in, maybe on the second power play, and limited minutes, because he is a good power play guy, obviously, and could probably fit in on the second power play and make that work a little bit better. But again, you got to look at the whole game, and you got to look at the whole series, and you got to say to yourself, if you're the coach, what do I do? Do I go with the experience, or do I go with the youngster who could come out, play unbelievable, score some big goals, or could be very quiet? Because it's not that easy coming in especially this kind of a situation. It's hard enough when you're drafted and then you go into training camp the next year, but let alone, he hasn't played either since March, and all of a sudden you've never played professional hockey, even in the American Hockey League, and now you're thrown into the National Hockey League. So, I mean, that's not easy for that kid. You give him a lot of credit for going out and playing, like I said, not bad enough to say he's not going to play in the playoffs, or not good enough to say he's definitely in, but good enough to say, you know what, he did pretty darn good for his first professional hockey game.
Well, the other part of it, too, that throws into the mix, and this is a nice problem for Leafs to have and Leafs fans to enjoy, is that Andreas Johnson skated the special teams today. So he's not that far apart as of our recording, that is, and we're a couple of days before the opening game of the play-in. So that's going to add to the mix also. And of course, if he's ready and healthy to play, he will definitely, there'll be no question he will take the spot. But just taking that a little step further, where I'd like to go with is, now Robertson came in, and, you got to love his energy, and you got to love the way the players responded to him. And he gained confidence as the camp went along, as we've talked about, and everybody's read about all week. But just take us through a couple of things here. What might have been going through his mind as camp went along, and he's noticed that he was getting a little more time with the big boys, less time skating with the aces, and then even leading into that opening game and walking into the room, putting on the real jersey. You did that twice. I mean, he did it with the Birmingham Bulls and WHAs, an 18-year-old, so the same age, and he did it again a year later with Vancouver. Walk us through what might have been going through his mind through that whole period, compared to yours.
Well, I think, first of all, you're nervous as hell. I don't care who you are. You're going in there and you're nervous as hell. I mean, there's no question about that. I was both times. I mean, that kind of wore off fairly quickly because, you get into exhibition games right away and then regular season games. But I can't even imagine that, he's coming right out of junior 4 months later. He's, and it's not like this is a regular season where you could say, okay, well, let's give him 9 games or give him 10 games or see how he does. Like, we're going right into an elimination round here. So
right.
He's also thinking about that too. So I would think he was pretty darn nervous. Now, over that month, roughly, that they had camp, I would think that he probably settled in a little bit. And, I'm sure a lot of guys talked to him and said, listen, relax. We know what you're capable of doing. Management, coaching, they know what you're capable of doing. Just play your game, relax, and go out and have fun. And, I'm sure he settled down quite a bit, but I would imagine going into that game on Tuesday that, like, he was a basket case all day long until he got on the ice, until the puck dropped, and until he got a couple of shifts in, and then probably things settled down. But I would imagine all day he was a basket case.
So when you arrived at the rink in Birmingham, your opening game, and you got to play, and again, you're not playing, I'll talk even your first exhibition, you're going to be nervous because you're an 18-year-old, there's expectations, You're taking some veteran's job. So there's all those things combined with, and you know how tight those dressing rooms used to be and very cliquey. You know what rooms can be like, I don't care what level you play at. There's always that sort of component to it. Walk us through your day when you played your first WHA game. And did anybody kind of help you out? Or does anybody,
No, nobody. And that was the thing. That was the difference, I think, back then compared to now, is I'm going into a game and everything was just like I just said. I was scared as hell, nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wanted to throw up before the game. That's how nervous I was. But after a couple of shifts, it kind of just felt like I was back in junior and I was playing again. And hockey just took over. Hockey sense took over. And the game took over. And you just went out and played. But, then the regular season started and it was the same thing all over again. And it took you, 2 or 3 shifts to get into that game, and then probably 10 games into the regular season before you actually felt comfortable enough to go out and do the things that you're capable of doing.
Yeah, and I think that that's always the key because once the puck is dropped, believe it or not, it is another hockey game, and everybody's played in hockey games since they've been 6 years old. So, just the question of the level and how many touches you get during the game, and how many times you're picking yourself up off the ice, and those are all the things that all factor in that maybe changes the level, differentiate between the lower and the higher levels. And I think that it's nice to see this problem Toronto has, and I know that as we discussed last week. They want nothing better than kids like this to have success. The fear is you're bringing in too soon. But the fact is, with cap constraints, you want the cheaper player on the roster if he can play at the level, no question.
Yeah, and don't forget that they're probably their initial thought was that to play him in the American League for a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're going from junior right to the National Hockey League. You're going from juniors to the American League. It's not easy. But it's a little bit easier than going right on to the National Hockey League. If you can get a half a year under your belt in the American Hockey League and then go to the National League, boy, oh boy, that is enormous, and that helps you a ton. And, because I think there's a bigger jump from junior hockey to the American League than I think there is from the American League to the National League. And, so I think 6 months in the American League probably would have prepared him so well for the National Hockey League.
Well, I believe that. And that's the thing. The hardest part sometimes is getting there. Just as you allude to, because when you're going from junior to the American Hockey, don't forget, you're going to a team of maybe those rosters are about 35, 40 guys in total throughout a season.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of them is trying to get to the show, and every one of them has been sent down. They're all trying to get back to the big league. They're not going to give you anything. You're going to have to beat them. It was when you move to that next level, management's eyes are on you and you alone. And so what you're doing is you're competing against yourself, and you're trying to do the best you can to stay competitive. And that part I totally agree with. And you want a kid over ready. You don't want him just, and that's always the fear when you bring him into. And, hopefully we'll watch Vaive with real interest here, but this kid definitely shows signs of some progress. And, there's definitely something that we can cheer about as Maple Leaf fans going forward. And nice to see that Johnson's coming back. And we have this problem that there is some competition and depth at all the positions. So keeping that all in mind, moving into the play-in, which begins in a couple of days, what's your prediction? What happens?
I don't like to predict.
I hate this too.
I put it this way. I think there's 8 series that are going to be going on in the play-in. I think 4 I'd be shocked if the lower seed won. And then there's 2 that are probably a coin flip because both teams are so evenly matched. And then there's another couple that, that if either team won, you wouldn't consider it an upset. So I think there's probably 2 out of the 8 that you wouldn't consider an upset depending on who wins. And then the other 6, I think there's probably at least 4 anyway that there would definitely be big upsets if certain teams lost. So, and then the other 2 are kind of a coin flip. So, I would think that's probably the same in the Western Conference as well. I really haven't looked at the Western Conference as much as the Eastern Conference for many reasons, because we want to see what the Leafs do. We don't care about Calgary, Vancouver.
What do you think the Leafs do? What do you think the Leafs do? What do you think the Leafs do in their series with Columbus? That's where I was going with it.
I think it's going to be very important to get off to a good start. Now, the thing they got going for them is they got home ice, so they're going to have their own dressing room. They're going to be a lot more comfortable.
Well, for some of the games, they got to go to the other dressing room in the away games. For some of the games.
Oh, the away games, that's right, yeah. But at least 3 of the games, they're going to have their own room.
Yeah.
If they jump out and grab that 2-0 lead, then, like I said, I think it's 90-some% that anybody in the best of 5 that's down the first 2 comes back to win. And I think the last team to do it was the Islanders, and I think it was 85, I think it was. So I like their chances. But again, they're going up against one of the best defensive teams in the league, and their power play wasn't that good the other night either. I mean, it was okay, but they went over, and although they did get two shorties, so that kind of helps a little bit. But when you're going up against good defensive teams, your offensive guys got to come through, and that will be the key. Is that their depth offensively is probably as good as any team that's in the playoffs or this play-in round or anything, but they need to perform. So again, it's going to be a really, really, for me, it's a real tough one to call. I say the Leafs win in 4, but I mean, I don't know what Columbus are doing. I don't know how they're going to come out, how they're going to play. Are they going to be as good defensively as they were in the regular season? Or, are they going to be a little bit more offensive? Who knows? But the Leafs, they got the depth and the offense to win in 4, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I think Toronto, the key, in my view, with Toronto is, I mean, they're going to go against, I mean, it's I hate the term, but they call it, if it comes down to being a track meet, there's no contest between the two clubs, obviously, with the talent of Toronto Maple Leafs. So what they're going to do is, Tortorella, the type of coaching he's going to do, this is going to be man on man, and this is going to be suffocating defense. So without stating the obvious and sounding too obvious about this, Toronto can definitely not afford to be chasing the game, because if they're chasing the game, what that's going to have a tendency to do is the frustration sets in, but that'll bring the defense more into the play. They'll be joining to play more. That just leaves them more exposed, and a team like Columbus just thrives on that, and that's the one thing that Toronto cannot do. So they have to be playing with the lead, and if they do that, I mean, I know it's obvious, but you hockey people know what I mean. If they can do that, they'll have some success. And, of course, Freddie has to play good, but, again, that goes for both teams.
Yeah, that goes for both teams. Their goaltending, they both have to be good if they're going to win. You're right, Toronto, they can't get behind too often and chase the game. One of the things I find with the Maple Leafs is when they do get a lead, they're a pretty darn good team. They tend to kind of lock the door, and they do a pretty good job of it. And that's just a mindset that you get. But when they're chasing the game, they seem to make mistakes, turn pucks over at the wrong time. It just seems everything goes against them when they're chasing the game. So yeah, I absolutely agree 100% that they are going to have to get off to good starts and keep that lead. And if they play with the lead, I don't think Columbus has enough offense to come back on some nights, especially if they're down 2 or 3. There's no way Columbus is coming back from those deficits. No,
I mean, that's my whole point. I mean, that works for anything. So, but with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and especially sort of the suspect defense they do have and defending in their own end. Now, if the forwards chip in as you suggest, all things will be equal. And that's the team we hope shows up, and they can do it. And there's no question they can. But again, we're sounding like fans saying these type of things now. So last week we did discuss that some of the possibilities that may befall the Maple Leafs should they not advance. First off, folks, as I mentioned before, and all you guys don't be emailing me anymore about them sending me texts and all that about the I'm just saying that for a second time now today. I love that.
I was glad it's you and not me.
I know, I was getting it. But I'm not. I love that kid. I love him in a Maple Leaf uniform for the rest of his life, that's for sure. And he just brings everything you want to the rink, and that's no question about that. But again, this is where we're going with our next part of this, of our segment here, is we've mentioned the importance of the draft. And the draft has been paramount for all the good teams through all the years, maybe except ours for a number of years. But now we seem to be much better at that. So draft picks going forward are going to be like gold. And for teams with cap challenge like the Torontos and the Tampas of the world, or anybody who's truly in competition and gets in the position where they have to make unpopular trades, as I said at the beginning of the show, they're going to have to be looking for assets coming back, but they're going to have assets that are manageable towards the cap. Next up, our producer, we're losing him, by the way, but we're being replaced with another good young guy who's coming with us. Andrews Marshall is going to be replacing our good friend, Steve Ellis, who I like to call, he just makes me so jealous because of how much knowledge he has about prospects and draft selections. I mean, this kid is, I call him a draft savant. So welcome to the show here. We're going to talk about some of the prospects coming up and what teams may be looking for, players they can maybe steal moving into the next few years. Stevie, come on in and join us for a second.
Apparently my camera doesn't want to show up, but I will in a second. How are you guys doing?
Well, that's a pretty good. I think that's a picture of Debbie that's on the screen there. So, Deb, thanks for joining the show. I didn't know she knew this much about hockey. My goodness. Debbie, I knew you were a
prospect
fan.
superstar.
She's a fan.
Especially the young players.
So Stevie is everybody's aware. He works the Hockey News. He's going back he's very excited to get back on. He's been a producer of a number of podcasts. He does Kipper's show, Online Movement. He's back at noon every day. So, I mean, this guy's a busy guy. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. He was watching games from Europe in midday when it was 90 degrees outside. So this guy has a hand on all the young prospects. So let's start right off. Stevie, I mean, the first pick seems to be a given. Tell us a little bit about the next couple of picks and maybe the first dozen picks in the draft. Are there any sleepers there?
Well, yeah. So it seems to be, depending on who you talk to, the number 2 pick is kind of it could go a few ways. I think the right pick will be Quinton Byfield, who plays for the Sudbury Wolves. This is a guy who's a big 6'4" player who could dominate the play. He's kind of what you'd want out of a power forward, minus the fact he doesn't get too physical at a lot of times, but he's got a lot of those other traits, and he's a guy that isn't who if he needs to use the body, he'll get it. Tim Stiltzel, another guy who's a very popular pick for number 2. He's a German prospect who I'd say had a pretty rough tournament against Switzerland a couple weeks back, but otherwise is a guy that almost was not too far off of a point per game in the German Pro League this year, which is really hard for a kid his age, and he dominated when he played for Germany at the World Junior. So I think those 2 guys are really close. I just think he'll go Byfield number 2. The 2 guys I'm really excited for, they're nicknamed the Terror Twins, Alex Holtz and Lucas Raymond out of Sweden. They've dominated when they've played together internationally, and I really like them. So Ottawa Senators, you get the 3rd and 5th pick. That could be a possibility. In terms of top defensemen, Jamie Drysdale, I've watched him play. Yeah, I've watched Jamie Drysdale play for a couple years now, and I really like him as a defenseman. Actually, there's a lot of similarities between him and Morgan Riley. And I feel like Morgan Riley will like a guy like Jamie Drysdale who can run the power play, and he's done a lot for a team that didn't really give him much to work with. So I really like him. The one name that I think most people are getting really excited about now, though, is goaltender Yaroslav Askaroff out of Russia. He is potentially going to be the first goalie since Carey Price to go in the top 10. And when you ask kind of he's got the size of Carey Price, he's got the glove hand of Carey Price, he just catches the other way. There hasn't been a goalie as hyped since Carey Price as Yaroslav Askaroff. And I think that makes this draft so good is you got really good talent in every position. You've got a goalie who's going to go top 10. And that alone is going to make this kind of a really fun draft. 2020 is going to be a good year if you have a draft pick. And I know right now the Leafs don't technically, it's protected under certain ways. But if they don't get it, the first round pick, last year they got Nick Robertson. It didn't seem to hurt them too badly. So they don't necessarily need the first round pick this year. It's a really strong draft in that way. But if they get it, if they do so, let's say go in the first round and they have a chance to get the first round pick back, they're going to get a guy who could be potentially a top 6 player almost immediately.
And that's what everybody's bank on. I mean, that's what makes it so exciting moving forward because, and again, the possibilities of trades and what any sort of combination can put up with that, no matter who wins that, it's going to have implications for probably a dozen teams because all this will all filter through. And of course, with this talent pool, so let's go on a little bit further and look a little bit further. We're really going to pick your brain on this one, Stevie. So going into 21.
Well, just before you start.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Mike, before you start, we might see a Brian Burke pull off this year where somebody trades down or Ottawa does something and gets 2 consecutive picks and takes those 2 Swedes who have played together for probably quite some time. Do we see something like that happening perhaps?
I think, honestly, this is as good of a year that we'll see it compared to past years. Ottawa, for a team that had so many struggles the last few years, I think they're actually a lot farther away or a lot closer to their peak Stanley Cup potential than a lot of people think because they went out and had the best AHL team this year, and a lot of those guys are going to move up for next season. So they've got already a really strong, promising draft class where if they were picking just 15th, I think they'd still be in really good shape. So they could afford to move. They could afford to move those guys, maybe get a goaltender of the future. The New York Rangers, they got a guy, Alexander Georgiev, who was rumored to be going to Ottawa at the trade deadline, and they have a pick that could turn into that. If that's their starting goalie, that's huge, because that's the thing Ottawa's missing right now. But that's the thing. Yeah, we could see teams kind of move up there because Ottawa's got those 2 picks. At the same time, Ottawa could come out with one of the best centermen in the draft in Byfield or Stiltzel, come out with the best defenseman in Jamie Drysdale, or come out with one of the top wingers in those Swedish Terror twins. So I think no matter what, they're going to come out okay. They don't need to trade, but they've got the ability where they can trade and still feel confident about what they're doing.
Well, I mean, Detroit's got the 4th pick, I believe. So, I mean, Detroit could maybe wrangle something because that's right in the middle. If that's how these guys are sort of ranked. I mean, maybe Detroit does something too and can move up and grab, because they really need to make a move after losing basically the 1st pick overall.
Tim Stiltzel would be a perfect pick for them. And like he's really good friends with Moritz Seider, who was their top pick last year. So that would be 2 Germans on the same team that know each other, and they play different positions, but that familiarity helps, especially when you're trying to move over across the world. And for that would be a really big one. So they would probably be a team that would really want to move up. It just, they don't have the assets really to do it. They don't have a really good prospect base. They got some good guys, but nothing too special. They did win the Traverse City tournament last year, which is one of the top prospect tournaments in the NHL, but they also did rely on a lot of their older guys, and they still don't have a goalie of the future there. So Detroit, there's a couple ways that can go from what I've heard. They're really excited about Cole Perfetti more than some teams are, and Perfetti went from being probably the best goal scorer to one of the best playmakers in 1 year. And if you have a guy who could do that, that's a fantastic guy that I think people are going to undervalue. So this year's no shortage of top goal scorers that are going to be first and second line players almost instantly. And this is the best draft we've seen since 2003 when they turned out guys like Corey Perry, and just every player seemed to be a big star in that draft. That's what we're seeing this year in 2020.
So now
79.
Yeah.
79.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, like I found your old card, and I mentioned this before, and I love the first fact being that you're married. Like,
yeah,
that's just weird card.
I guess I probably wanted to get it out there before, so everybody knew right away, and that was the first thing I said. But I've heard a lot of people talking about the German kid, and they comparing him to Draisaitl. And some even saying that he could be better than Draisaitl. He's a big kid, from my understanding. He's a centerman. Probably could play the wing if he had to. But I've heard a lot of comparisons to him and Draisaitl.
Yeah, so that's Draisaitl was the number 3 pick, and we could see Tim Stiltzel be the next number 3 pick. So he's got good size at 6 foot. He's about 180 pounds, but my concern with him is that he doesn't use it enough. And I think there'll be evident at points where he'll try to do too much with the puck, that when he doesn't have the puck, he's almost kind of just angry. He's mad at himself, and he's letting it beat him up. Well, you'll see some prospects that will use, like, if they make a mistake, they'll use it to improve. I think Stiltzel, especially when playing against Switzerland. Now, it was a summer tournament, doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and they haven't been playing for a long time, but that was not what we expected, where he was just shut out so often, where he just couldn't get anything done. He was getting frustrated, but there might not be a better passer in this draft. And a guy that could set up someone is going to be so important. And my prediction for them is he's a 75 to 80 point guy. I don't think he'll be as good as Draisaitl, but I think he's going to be so well-rounded that we'll still be talking about a guy who'll be in 10 NHL All-Star games in his career, which not exactly bad. I would say almost in some cases, he's kind of got like a Patrice Bergeron style to him, and that's not a bad guy to be kind of compared to. He's reliable in his own zone. He's got the skill to set everybody up. So if he's a guy that goes out and gets 50, 60 assists a year, I think that's going to be super valuable. So much to like with him so far.
So now just moving forward, I mean, so it's a rich draft, as we can tell from how excited you are about some of the players. Going forward, 21 may not be quite as much depth as we're seeing now, but moving forward beyond that, give us a quick summation here of what you see coming in the years 22 and 23.
Well, if you like 2020, 2022 is going to be so much more exciting. We've got Shane Wright, who the best comparable is probably John Tavares at this point. So that's a good sign, as we've seen Tavares has been a pretty good player. And Shane Wright, he got exceptional status, and he immediately was
Kingston, right?
Kingston, yep. And he's born out of Burlington, and great young kid. I've been watching him for a long time. He was actually the cornerstone of that Don Mills Flyers team last year in the GTHL, which was an incredible story. Their main goalie was unfortunately killed in a home invasion, and it was a really sad story. And the Flyers went out, and I think they lost like 2 or 3 games all season long, like in overtime or something. Like, they were just dominant, and one of the best minor midget teams we've ever seen. And Wright was the reason why, in a lot of cases, they won so much. He does everything you like. I don't know if I've seen a guy who could pass the puck at his skill level since Connor McDavid at the same age, and that's a pretty good comparison. Yeah, I'd say he's a good player. There's Matt Savoy, who almost got exceptional status out of the West, and he's going to be another guy who is going to be such a fantastic player. He got hurt early in the WHL this year. It came back and really showed that he belonged there. And WHL is not an easy league to step in, because you step in younger than the OHL players do. And as a result, like, there's older, bigger competition while he's still in the growing stages of his career and life. So that was tough. The one name that I think everyone's going to laugh at, though, is Brad Lambert out of Finland. Not exactly a very Finnish name, but his dad I can't recall where his dad played, but he's from Saskatchewan. So they've got that kind of story there. And that's another guy who he's one of the youngest players, I believe actually the youngest player to ever play in the Finnish Pro League, which is a really strong European league. And he got key minutes right away and has already been training with the under-20 Finnish team. So these are all guys, Shane Wright and Brad Lambert, I think we'll see in the 2021 World Juniors. But that's good. And 2023, it's still really early out, but Connor Bedard is the best Western-based prospect we've ever seen. And that's saying something, because he went out there and got 80-something points in 30 games this year against guys that were 3-4 years older than him, which is huge at that level. The ages do matter in minor hockey, but just 2022, 2023 is going to just have so many big-name talents. And I'm just scratching the surface. There are so many guys we can go through there. It's just that good of a draft, and it's really exciting to kind of see, because those 2 years are going to be good. 2021 is going to be fine, but it's more of a defense heavy. It's not going to be a lot of offensive superstars like we're seeing 2020 and 2022, 23. But 2024 has got some good names too, but that's a little too far out of the future. That's like 06 kids.
There. So, yeah. I mean, I think
go ahead, Steve, how many of those guys, like in the next, like you're saying, especially those 2 years we're talking about, like how many players are, would you term like franchise players? You know, like Crosby's, guys that are going to come in, McDavid's and the likes that are going to come in and be franchise players.
Yeah, that's one where I think more so than usual, because each year, there's always some like key players in the draft. Like last year, Jack Hughes and Capo Caco were the big ones. But that draft was good, but like a step down from this year. In 2022, I think we're calling them the three-headed monster, because those three guys of Savoy, Lambert, and Shane Wright are just like it's one thing to say a guy who's 15 or 16 is going to be a good player in a few years, but when they're have this many scouts getting crazy about these players at this young age to the level we don't usually see outside of the McDavids, the Tavares, the Stamkos. Those are guys that are going to be instant fan favorites and instant game changers. Like Shane Wright was the best player in Kingston. Kingston was one of the worst teams in the OHL this year. But for him to go out there and immediately, as the youngest player in the league, and the youngest player since Connor McDavid to play in the league, that's a huge deal. And I think that gets really, it's a reason to get excited. So I'd say that year for sure, you got three guys who are going to turn franchises around in the way that we saw Crosby and Malkin, Ovechkin do in 05, 06. But then we're also going to, year after, Connor Bedard would be shocked if he got out there and gets 80 points in his first season. And Berkeley Catton the year after that will be another huge name. So these are guys that it's not just like they're the top of that draft year, so they're going to be great automatically. It's like, no, these guys are going to be superstars. And I think that's what's exciting.
Well, on that note,
that is exciting. That is exciting. Steve, I'm going to try to stump you, though.
Sure.
Who was the first player to ever get exceptional status in junior hockey?
That'd be John Tavares.
Right. Well, I didn't think I was going to stump you, but I was going to try anyway.
I'll say this.
I'm going to get him on one of those.
I'll say this. I'm from Oakville. That's where Tavares is from. It was hard to ignore Tavares. Yeah, I've heard stories of him and Sam Gagner playing road hockey and shooting balls and pucks into the late hours of the night and annoying all the neighbors. It worked out quite well for those two, I'd say. But Tavares is a guy that I will always have a great appreciation for, as he was like being from Oakville. He was one of the only guys who, like, he was the biggest guy to ever make the NHL from Oakville at that time. There weren't a lot of guys. Rob Zamner was one, but the list of guys were very low. Ever since then, we've seen Steve Mason. We've seen a lot of more depth guys. And now the 2005 born Oakville Rangers kids are probably the best team in Canada in terms of 05 age kids. So it's getting exciting.
Well, it is, guys. You're almost exactly right, though, because Dave Gagner had a rink in his backyard. He lived on the lake shore. Yeah. Okay. And he had the pipes underneath and everything because him and his brother had a company at the time who made them. So Johnny Tavares, Cody Golubeff, Sam, and my son Justin, they were probably over there four nights a week playing. They had lights and everything, so they played. And believe me, when those four guys went 2-on-2, it was a war out there. Yeah. I never saw 13, 14, 15-year-old kids going at it so hard that they hated to lose. And those four guys were in that category. So it was a lot of fun to watch.
Well, guys, I think that's, what we're seeing is that the talent pool moving forward is not getting any thinner. If anything, it's expanding. And what it's doing is it's going to put more pressure on. You don't want to be a 27-year-old in this league anymore. With all these young kids coming up, they're going to take your job pretty quickly. So it's going to become even more paramount for teams to have kids step into the lineup, especially with cap constraints and all that stuff we've talked about. So we're going to be watching with real interest moving forward. But I think, Squid, the listeners have had enough of us. Steve, I want to thank you for joining us. We'll get you back again to pick up on some of these thoughts that you have moving forward. And we're definitely going to get you back on. And you're going to have to explain a lot of this stuff to me off the air, by the way. It's a little above our heads, me and Squid. But enough of us so far. We want to go back to the second part of our interview with Paul Bissonnette. The first part was pretty funny. I think the second part is even funnier. And I think we're going to pick up right where we were speaking about his career and just joining the National Hockey League. So, now going to the other things, obviously everybody wants to make it in the league, but you made the adjustment. So the reality for you, how hard did that actually hit you when you actually arrived and took a look around what camps were really like?
The number one piece of advice I give to people that want to get to the National Hockey League level, like even younger kids, is don't be stubborn in your role. I'm not saying don't try to chase your dreams. And if it is a skill guy that you want to be, you have to take a step back at some point and evaluate, are you lighting up the league on a constant basis? Because if you are, okay, then sure. But if you're not, and you're going to be stubborn and that's what you want your role to be, well, eventually you're going to find out no team has a use for a guy who thinks he's going to be, a rusher when he's actually a crusher, and then he's going to turn out being an usher. Right, Rick? Am I crazy here?
No, Rick, the same thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And, it was a little bit different for me, obviously, is that, well, first of all, I thought I should have went fourth. I went fifth. Washington took Mike Gardner. That wasn't a bad pick, so I can't complain about that. Yeah, pretty good. But one of the things that I had to establish early in my career, which was really not part of my game, was the fact that I had to show people that I wasn't going anywhere. If I was standing in front of the net taking a beating, that I wasn't going to, they weren't going to intimidate me. So I fought a ton my first 3 years pro. And like you, got the shit kicked out of me, I don't know how many times. I was knocked out cold twice. But you know what? I felt if I didn't do it, I was going to get intimidated my entire career. And they were just going to continue to do it. So by them knowing that, hey, I'm sticking up for myself, and if I got a whacky across the arms of my Titan that was about that big around and break your arm, I will. And so that really helped open things up for me a little bit and gave me a little bit more room, I think, than they were tired of breaking their hands on my helmet, probably more than anything else. But,
Well, hey,
or
Squid,
my face.
I thought you meant that hair and that hairspray. Jesus, you got some flow, buddy.
Just got to put a number on the side. Put a number on the side.
Not bad for an old fella.
I tell you what, the ladies were probably making panty soup up in the crowd when you were in warm-ups. That's for sure.
Hey, Squid, tell the story about Sather sent it with Semenko. I think Biz will appreciate that one.
Oh, it was in the WHA, and Semenko was in Edmonton, and Sather was a yappy little prick, and every time I went by the bench, he'd be yapping at me, because I always scored against Edmonton for some reason. I don't know why, but that year anyway. So finally, we're lined up for a face-off right by their bench, and he is yapping, and I just turned around and I said, "Will you shut up?" I said, "You were nothing but a pussy when you played." And he goes, "I'm going to send Semenko after you." And I said, "Go ahead." So anyway, that was a mistake, by the way. But
Semenko was so tough.
So I'm playing against him, and I'm back checking. Yes, I was back checking, and it was offside at our blue line, so we both kind of turned, and he just reached around and suckered me, and then he grabbed me by the back of the sweater, hit me a couple more times. I was already out. Both gloves fell off. We both got 5 for fighting. So anyway, I was out cold probably for about a half an hour. So we're playing in Winnipeg the next night or the 2 nights later, and I couldn't make the trip because my nose was like everywhere. And but we were back in Edmonton a week later. So same thing happens. He starts yapping. And I'm going to send Semenko after you. He called him Semi, I think. And I go ahead. So anyway, I got the puck by the boards. I see him coming, and he's got me lined up, and I go, okay, he's going to kill me. So I just got out of the way at the last second. He hit the boards, and he fell to the ice and didn't wear a helmet. I took my stick, and I just little tap on the head. Just a little bit of blood, not a whole lot. I didn't want to make a big scene out of it. And I leaned down and I said, "You ever do that to me again, and I'll cut your neck off next time."
Oh.
And of course, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm either dead or he doesn't have a clue what I'm capable of doing, and he's going to leave me alone. Well, he didn't bother me the rest of my career, because I took it was a big gamble, but I took it and it paid off. And because he didn't know if I was capable of it or not.
And going back to what you were saying about how you fought early in your career, Dion Phaneuf came in the league as an 18-year-old defenseman with Calgary. And it's obvious that times have changed, and very similar to what you're talking about. He felt that he was getting challenged a lot. He fought 20 times, and progressively throughout his career, people just left him alone. They wouldn't go to the crease as hard as, because I think that when guys are aware that you'll throw down, you're going to hold your own, they tend to gravitate away from it. They kind of let you be, and they don't want to be the ones getting their eyes pumped shut.
So coming out
as a 19-year-old in the WHA, I led the league with 248 penalty minutes, and that was a lot of beatings.
Yeah, but you probably got a lot of space out there after.
Yeah, you know what? It really helped. And Brof was their coach at the time, and he sat me down a couple of times and talked about that exact thing and said, this is something, and I already kind of knew I had to be a shit disturber in a certain kind of way to get some space, but he reinforced that in me. And I went on, and that first couple of years in the NHL was the same thing. And then Mike Nikolak was coaching in 81, 82, and he said, "Rick," he said, "we need you on the ice, not in the penalty box." And that was the best words I ever heard from a coach in my entire life. And then went on and scored 54 goals that year. So,
Rick, the coaches actually told me the opposite. They're like, "We need you in the box, not on the ice." That's what I knew. That's what I knew where my career was headed.
Hey, so boys, this one's for both you guys again. So coming out of your first pro camps, and we'll even talk about making your first National Hockey League teams. What did you guys find that was you weren't expecting, or like, did anybody take you under their wing? And what were the things that you just sort of walked away from that you weren't expecting going to those camps and being a pro?
I was a little immature when I first got to pro. I think I got excited that I finally had no real leash. I had some money in my bank account. I was fortunate where I always had great leaders, and I was part of great organizations. I played for 3 in my entire career. I played with the Kings, who treat their players incredibly, just as if the Arizona/Phoenix Coyotes when I played for them, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then also being surrounded by good leadership, because they run a tight ship there. I had Alain Nazardine as my captain my first couple of years in Wilkes-Barre, as well as Terry Virtue, who played a long time in pro in the ECHL. And then after Crosby in the NHL, I went on to play with Shane Doan for 5 years. So it's just, the biggest surprise, which it should have been, was just how professional the guys, especially the ones who had long careers, were. Just every day come with that working mentality, work boots on, first guy there, last guy to leave, taking care of their bodies as far as what they were eating. They weren't drinking too much, and they weren't partying. So it's really changed, Rick, and you can attest to this. It used to be where you put your bags down when you got to the next road city, and everybody would go out and grab a bite to eat and a bunch of beers, and it was a drinking culture, and that's the culture that when I first hit pro, it was very similar to that, and you slowly saw it fade away. Where I think Hal Gill and Bill Guerin, my first couple training camps when I was there in Pittsburgh, they would have a 6-pack after games waiting in their stall. And that is now it's a protein shake and the vitamins, which is fine because the game is getting faster and it is getting better, but it's definitely changed.
Rick, what about you?
Well, there's no question about that. I went to Vancouver, and we had some great leaders. Don't get me wrong. We had some great players who led by example, but we did go out quite a bit, and they were the ones kind of leading the pack and saying, okay, we're having lunch, and God love him, just passed away. Jack McElhargy was one of the guys that was one of our big leaders, and Donnie Lever, Dennis Kearns, Harold Sneps. Like, those are the guys that kind of protected you and took you under their wing. Unfortunately, under their wing was to the bar, and that's the way it was mostly every day. And but God bless Jack, and condolences to his family, because he was a great guy, great person, and he was a great teammate as well. And that was a big thing back then, was regardless of how we lived, it was different than it is now. But you have to be different now, because you have to be in great shape. You have to take care of your body. But regardless of how it was, these guys were all fantastic individuals. Like, they're just, in the room and out of the room, I played with so many unbelievable people that it was, it's hard to name them all, because they were all great people. Regardless of how we lived, it was a different era, but the players were wonderful.
So now, Biz, when you finally actually made it, I don't know if you know or not, but you scored your first goal on November the 12th in 2009. Do you know who you scored it against?
Oh, yeah. I could tell you every shift that I probably had in the NHL. That's how few I had. And when it comes to goals, I have 7. I'll remember every single one. And yes, I scored against Carey Price at home. We ended up losing that game. I got in a fight earlier in the game, but I scored a fucking goal off my skate, Rick, on Carey Price. But when my grandkids ask me, I'm going to tell them I picked it up behind the net. I dodged 3-4 checkers. I split PK Subban and Markov and went bar down on Carey Price. It's exactly how I will describe it to my grandkids.
Absolutely. Well, you know what else you can
you
add?
should.
Well, you know what else
you
can
should.
add? Hey, you know what else you can add? November the 12th, 1931, for you guys, was the opening of Maple Leaf Gardens in the first game at the Gardens by the Leafs. So, Biz, you scored on the 78th anniversary. So, as a grown-up Maple Leaf fan, look at that little tidbit you can add to it for your grandkids.
Oh, I love this this podcast. Everything comes back tied to the Leafs. Hey, Rick, everything comes back. The center of the hockey universe.
well, I'll set it up for you guys.
Between Toronto and Montreal, it pretty much those two cities are the center of the hockey universe. I would say. I mean, growing up, well, especially for me, when there was only 12 teams, I mean, Montreal, Toronto, that's all we saw. We never got to see any of the other teams because that's all that was on Hockey Night in Canada. But it was, Toronto and Montreal. That was it.
So, boys, for you guys again, I guess that these questions can work for both you guys. When so we'll start with you, Biz, again. Was there a moment that you knew that you actually had made it as a professional? Like there was some sort of acceptance in the room from the players, or you got that look or the nod from the coach, or something you knew, something you did, a fight, a goal, or something, or that one moment that you knew, I think I've made it.
Well, it was probably a fight.
I want to
a couple instances. When I was playing with Pittsburgh, I got in a fight on home ice against Matt Bradley of the Washington Capitals. I ended up squeaking a punch in and ended up knocking him out. And it was weird because all of a sudden now when I was going out in Pittsburgh, people were starting to recognize me and stuff. So that's kind of when I was like, oh my God, this is like really weird. And then the second moment when I realized that I'd finally like established myself and made it, was we were actually in Nashville. Funny story, it all comes back around. The place I was drafted when I ended up signing my first ever one-way contract. And I got a 2-year deal. And Brad Treliving, who was the assistant general manager, he's now he's with Phoenix at the time. Now he's with Calgary. He was in communication with my agent. I was like, oh my goodness. I think I was a healthy scratch like 10 games in a row. And then my agent called. He goes, hey, they want to sign you to a 2-year extension, a one-way. I thought he was fucking with me. I say, yeah, okay. I say, I'm just happy you're not calling me to let me know I'm getting sent down. And sure enough, I ended up signing that one way, 2 years, and it was really cool. I called my parents, and I'm a pretty conservative guy, and at that point, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right.
Hey, Ricky, what about you? So I mean, you guys in Vancouver.
Well, I was on a one-way pretty much from the beginning. I mean, it wasn't. It's funny because my son played 1 year in Bridgeport, signed a 2-way with the Islanders. So he was making whatever it was, 600, I think was the minimum then. And he was making 150 in the American Hockey League. And he's sitting on the couch and I said, you realize that if you spend the whole year in the American Hockey League, you're making $30,000 more than I made my first 2 years in the NHL combined, because my first contract was 60, 60, 65, 70.
Crazy.
So, it was, but mind you, that was a long time ago. That was 1979. But, he just laughed and he didn't believe me, but sure enough, that's exactly what it was. But it was, I guess when I got to Toronto, there was some bad moments in Vancouver. Harry Neal and I didn't seem to see eye to eye, and I don't know what the problem was exactly, but when he told me I was traded, we got to Toronto. Punch Imlach was still a general manager, and he said to Billy Derlago and I, he said, you guys are going to get a chance to play a ton here. Just go out and do the best you can, be the best at what you do, and keep your noses clean. And, sure enough, everything kind of turned around right there in Toronto for me. And all I did was concentrated on doing the best I could every day. And that included practice. I wasn't a good morning person, and the guys used to know that. And they'd get on me sometimes in the mornings. And I would throw things at guys and run guys in practice because I wasn't a morning person, and they knew that. They would get under my skin, and that's how I approached it. Every day was like, I got to be the best, and if I got to run a guy in a drill, I'm going to do it. It's the only way that you're going to get better is by every day trying to get better. And I used to stay after practice and shoot pucks and tip pucks in front of the net. I used to go on the ice half hour before anybody with a bucket of pucks. It was probably the best moments I ever had in my life, actually. It was just me at Maple Leaf Gardens,
buddy. It's therapeutic.
Firing them up. Firing
Therapeutic.
them off the glass. It is. You know what, Biz? You're absolutely right. It was therapeutic for me, and I loved every second of it.
So now, I can hear you guys. I mean, and it's you put the work in, you're going to get rewarded. And I mean, that's one thing about hockey and hockey players, and most things in life are attributed to that. And it brings me to that next sort of phase in your life, Biz, where you become very well known, and that's in the social world. And you're one of the first guys to get on Twitter and really take advantage of that. What gave you the inspiration to do that?
Scotty Upshaw asked me, why don't you get on Twitter? You can really joke around on there. And I just didn't understand it. I heard Charles Barkley talking about it, how stupid it was on ESPN at the time. And I agree with him, because a lot of people, what they were doing is they were doing it to just update people, being like, this is what I'm doing. But then I realized that you could go on there and joke around and interact with fans. So when I hopped on one summer after training, it was this, the season after we were getting some time off. And I remember Scotty Upshaw saying, I said, I'll check out what this is. And it just became fun that you could be that close with fans and give them a glimpse of inside the life of what it was like to play in the National Hockey League. And I didn't take it for granted for a minute. So I think they were just grateful that, the fans were getting like, oh, like what's going on their plane? And, I'd be posting a picture of like inside the private jet or whatever it was. So they found it fascinating. It was something that happened very organically. And I'm fortunate, because I think the one thing that a lot of guys, after they spend their entire lives doing something, is they don't know what's next. Half of these guys probably played junior and didn't take their education seriously because they thought they were going to play hockey forever. And the ones that did is you walk away with not a lot of life skills outside of hockey. Mm-hmm. Well, I was fortunate where I get to now stay in the game and be involved in media inside the only thing that I've really ever known, and that's hockey. So it took me on a wild ride, and you kind of alluded toward it at the end of your what we said about the last answer, is the hard work. That's one thing that hockey taught me, is you got to get up every morning and you got to work. You got to put the work boots on. And I've never been shy to work hard. I kind of got that from my parents, especially my mother, and it's kind of just led into what's happened post career. And I couldn't be more grateful for it.
So you built up this network of fans and this following, and the funny thing is, there's this guy Biz Nasty on Twitter. He's got funny things to say, and I think that Coyotes actually did they tell you to stop for a little bit because they thought maybe you spent a little too much time doing that?
They had to call me in to tone me down for the things I would say on there. At one point, I deleted my first account because my agent told me to get off, because he heard rumblings that I was on here just creating up a storm. And I remember he called me. He's like, he goes, you got to get off Twitter. Like there's no good that can come of this. You just fly under the radar, play hockey, and that's it. And that he couldn't have been more wrong. He could not have been more wrong about social media. And I'm glad I hopped back on, because all the fans, the Coyotes fans, were messaging the team and calling the team and saying, why did you make him get off social media?
Yeah. And
they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about? I don't even know if we knew this guy had a Twitter account. And they said, hey, why don't you tone her down a little bit and hop back on when the season gets back going? And I did. And then it's gotten back to where it's gotten to now. That's why the first one was Biz Nasty. Now it's Biz Nasty 2.0. That's where the name derives from.
Okay. So, I know. Well, no, go ahead, Rick.
The funny thing is, you're talking about Twitter and Instagram, and I just started on Instagram like maybe 6 months ago. And I do a lot of things. I'm out doing alumni games and appearances and everything. I make sure that I, use my phone, which I don't really know how to use all that well. But I make sure I get it done. I do have a guy that does my social media for me and kind of ties everything in and so on. But I make sure he gets the content and puts it out there. And I think it's a great thing, especially for me at my age. But I'd hate like hell to think of what it would have been like if it was around when I was playing, because there were some characters back then that.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been insane. it really would have been insane.
And going back to what you said about the you jumped on Instagram now and you're around the town, whether it's signing autographs or helping kids out, it's all about staying busy and just keeping your mind active. And that's why when I say I'm so grateful for it is I'm one of those people, we talked about it earlier on about how I need to stay moving all the time. I need to keep doing and trying to grow and do experience all these different things. And it's opened up those avenues for me in which you're talking about. Now you get to go do all those things. And I'm sure you being on Instagram, I mean, it led to us doing this interview. Yeah. It'll lead to us getting you on the Spit and Chicklets podcast. And it opens up all these different avenues. I'm sure you've done 10, 20 things because you hopped on social media.
Well,
it's made a big difference. I've done, I don't know, probably just through Instagram alone, it's probably led to about 35 or 40 appearances and ownership in a racehorse. And you name it, there's been so many things that have happened because of that. So I'm grateful that I did get on, and all these kind of neat, good things are happening now. And my son's a whiz at it. My youngest guy, he's much the same as you.
Hey, Mike, keep going. Mike, I wonder how many of those ladies that were sitting at the Toronto Gardens have been messaging him in the DMs on Instagram.
Well, I don't know. He's keeping that kind of quiet.
They're all dead by now.
Well, it's not funny to laugh that they're dead, but that was just fucking funny.
Well, but you know what? But the thing is, Biz, you know what? Like my son Ryan. Well, when you called today, we were talking. My son, all his buddies, that's your demographic. Like you ask one of those kids who watched the game last night, any game, no, but he can tell you every play that happened, every comment that came out of the game, and every player. Like today, we were talking about when I was listening to Shaw today on your podcast, he knew right away who the player was, and he hadn't listened to it yet. But those kids, like we old dinosaurs like me and Rick. I mean, we're the guys that this is all new to us. But for you picked up on this, carried it, and it led to Spit and Chicklets. So, I mean, while we're on that wave, I mean, how did that all come about? And that's just taking it to another whole level.
So I had this idea of when I retired, I wanted to create this show where you'd show up to the rink with your hockey bag and you'd get in the locker room with the boys. You'd open up your hockey bag. You'd have your gear. You would never actually end up getting dressed, but there'd be beers in there. And, you'd sit around telling stories. And I have a lot. We did a lot of crazy shit off the ice. And I didn't even know what podcasts were at the time. So I told Keith Yandel the idea. I ended up going to St. Louis after my time with the Coyotes on a PTO, and Ryan Whitney was there. And we played together in Pittsburgh, and I told him the idea, and he was like, oh, that'd be awesome. We spent every waking moment during that PTO together. And halfway through that next season, I think he ended up finally retiring, and he said, I want to start a podcast. And who's with me? And he tagged me, Colby Armstrong, and I think a couple other guys. And I texted him. I said, hey, I'll definitely do one with you after I'm done playing, but I still got a few more years in the tank, and I want to enjoy my career. Well, Rear Admiral, a sports journalist from Boston area, a big Bruins fan, he'd reached out to Ryan. He'd done work with Barstool in the past. And he said, hey, I'll start a podcast with you. I have a mixer at my house. You come over, we shoot the shit on the couch. We interview guys. And that's how they started. Well, over the course of their first, whatever it was, let's say 40 episodes, Mike Grinnell, who's now our producer, had reached out to our Rear Admiral on email. And he said, hey, I think I can improve the overall sound quality, and I have a really good mixer, and I could produce your guys' podcast where you could just worry about being the host. And RA ignored the email. And sure enough, a couple episodes later, what happens? RA's mixer breaks.
Yeah.
RA goes back in his email, messages Mike Grinnell and says, hey, my mixer broke. Why don't you meet us here next week and you can record? And ever since then, he hopped on the podcast. So now it was Rear Admiral, Witt, and Grinnell as a producer. Well, I finally retire. I did some film project, and I said, hey, let me get my feet wet with the Coyotes organization, and after the season, we'll see if I can end up hopping on. I told the Coyotes, hey, I'm going to hop on this podcast. we joined forces. And at the time, I think they were getting around 50,000 listeners an episode. And now, with adding the Canadian demographic, because I have a strong one, we're averaging over 500,000 an episode now. And it's crazy what it's gotten to. And we love it, and we're forever. I mean, I don't know what's my grateful count on this episode. Probably about 20. It's saved my post career. I'm so happy that it happened.
So why is it so successful? There's so many podcasts out there. What is it that you guys do that you bring to the audience that you think is different than everybody else? Like, why do you think it's so successful?
Well, it just adds.
They tell a lot of funny shit for
starters.
Yeah,
that too. I mean, I told some pretty wild stories. Now I got a girlfriend, and we're pretty serious. When I first got on there, I tell stories about some of the one girl. We don't need to go into details, but it just got wild, and I think that's what kind of drew everybody in initially, and just the stories and the camaraderie. We got RA, who's a blue collar sports fan. He's giving his perspective. We have Ryan Whitney, who was kind of that silver spoon kid growing up, who was a very, very skilled player at the National Hockey League level, made a lot of money, has a lot of credibility, and then just kind of the hard-nosed guy who clawed his way to the top and got all the experiences from the NHL. And it's a great mix. I think we're all similar, but yet different in a lot of areas. And I don't know, it took off, and I think that I think people are enjoying it. And I think given what hockey fans, what they pay for tickets, and how expensive it is to take your family, I think it's nice, and I think that they deserve to hear and get entertainment for free and hear about all these guys' personalities and stories from behind the scenes, because then they're going to find out how wacky and down to earth some of these guys really are.
Well, see, but that brings me to the point that I wanted to bring through all of this is the National Hockey League has always been, and you touched on it, Rick's touched it, we've all touched on this, that hockey players are brought up to be team-oriented guys. No me. It's all, we, and it's all team-orientated. So there's no sort of standing out and making these outlandish statements like a basketball player would do, or some of these baseball players and stuff like that, when it's all about, self-promotion. And the league's no doubt had its cast of characters with the Roneks and Hulls and Luongos and Averys and all that of the world, you and all these guys. Do you think, and when I listen to your podcast, what I find interesting, even though I know a lot of hockey players and guys' personalities, but when you hear a guy like Scott Gomez come on there, I would never in a million years dreamt a guy like that would have the stories and the personality that he carried forward. And this guy was so down to earth and so humble, and the way he talked and told stories, he had me in stitches the whole podcast. And this guy should have his own show. And he's just one of the dozens. So the point being is this NHL, they've got to behind the scenes be applauding you guys, because this is what everybody says the National Hockey League is missing: personality. Like PK Subban tries to do it to a certain degree.
Yeah,
see where I'm going with this? This is something I think the next stage the NHL has to get to. Would you not agree?
Yeah, and I think that we have our own little bubble, and you also got to keep everybody happy, and that's what's so hard with corporate brands now is, we have some people who don't like our podcast and don't like what we talk about in some of the subjects we do focus on. Yeah, but it's we're just trying to grow the game, and I think that when people become just as excited about the personalities as they do as the product on the ice, it just puts your product that much more over the top. So I don't know what their feelings are, but we're grateful that they've been supportive of us, and we want to keep this thing going. We want to get hockey to the place where it's worldwide, and where it's being played in China, and where it's being played, all these different places that it's not being played, and it's to the size of the NBA. Maybe even, who knows, the NFL, which that's a mega ship.
Well, I mean, if it takes off in China, who knows what the possibilities are there,
Exactly.
The population. So, I mean,
Biz, as you were saying, you guys have just kind of taken off and everything, and you played in the ECHL. Earlier this year, how everything shut down in the ECHL. The guys didn't get paid their last 3 weeks. And I give you guys a lot of credit for initiating the fund to help these guys get paid. And of course, my son's one of them, so I'm happy about that. But it's not just about that. It's about just the thought of you guys just going ahead and doing that, to me, I thought was unbelievable. And but so that tells me that you've never really forgotten where you came from and how you got there, for you to go out and take that initiative.
Yeah. So what you're alluding to is when this all got shut down, the ECHL, where your son was playing at the time, they were the first ones to cancel everything, because the owners in that league, they have to pay for the apartments. It just didn't look like there was light at the end of the tunnel. And unfortunately, it's the type of league where, these guys don't have guaranteed contracts. And at the time, it was uncertain whether they were going to be paid their last 3 weeks. I, as I mentioned earlier, started my professional career in the ECHL. I was fortunate enough to be on an entry-level contract where I had teammates that were making, $250 after taxes a week. And I know what these guys go through in the summertime because they don't get paid throughout the summertime. And some of them, are so passionate about hockey, but yet they can't afford training and or the proper, supplies in order to get themselves to that AHL level and or the NHL level. And I talk about the ECHL quite a bit on my podcast, and I'm actually grateful I got to spend close to 2 years there, because it was silly. We were staying at the Motel 6s and guys were doing it strictly for the love of it. And because I'd spent time there and I know what I'd imagine a lot of those guys are going through, especially when they heard they weren't going to be getting their paychecks. And that's not even talking about guys who have wife and kids to worry about. I figured, guys, let's try to raise a little bit of money here. We'll get some sponsors together. We'll release some of the interviews that we've done. We'll do it in video form on YouTube. And I think with the GoFundMe and all the sponsors together, and also he's not going to be happy that I say this, Dubas, GM for the Toronto Maple Leafs, he reached out and he said, hey, we want to help out. He donated money as well. We had one of our fans who's from Denver who wrote a check for $10K, just some random guy who's got money. So I think collectively, we're going to get close to maybe 100,000. We're at least over 80 grand. And I think that all the players are going to see every dime that they should have for that last 3 weeks. And hey, if we can do our part to help, whatever. It was cool to do. It was fun. The fans got something out of it. And of course, thank you to the sponsors as well. Budweiser, Bud Light, Boyke's, DHM Detox, and Can-I brands were all the 5 sponsors.
So any of the viewers or listeners want to make a contribution, can they still do that? Is there somewhere they can go?
Yeah, they can go to the Barstool website. I think we still have the GoFundMe up, and anybody can go donate. And listen, it's a very difficult time. That's why it was great to get sponsors on board, because we understand a lot of people, either got furloughed and or lost their jobs to what's going on with COVID. So we didn't necessarily want to ask a lot of people for money, but hey, for those of you who have been fortunate out there, if you want to chip in and help these guys out who provide entertainment at a lower level, go ahead and do so.
Well, that's awesome. Well, guys, I mean, it's getting near that end where we've been going on here for some time now with you, Biz, but we gotta get a couple stories out of you. I know you love to get the stories out of the guys that come on. You had some wild times probably in the minors, maybe a couple of your early ones that maybe stood out that might have been fun ones. And Rick, I'm going to come at you too with one.
Well, Rick, I was telling the ECHL that the experiences I had. Well, we in Wheeling, we used to have this sleeper bus, and this thing used to fucking break down all the time. And of course, we're going to play Johnstown, and luckily we have a booster bus that's following us, and it breaks down halfway on the way to the game, and they can't fix it. So we have to actually get all the boosters off the booster bus. They help us load all of our bags over into the normal bus, and they sat on the side of the highway and waited until our bus was fixed, and they took it to the game, where we got there, just in time, because they were behind us and they gave us their bus. Yeah. So these fans, man, they're not only loyal and willing to follow us to games at those lower levels, but in a time of need where we would have been late for the game, they even give us their booster bus. So that was a wild experience.
It's like Slapshot.
It was like Slapshot, and those are the little moments at the ECHL level that kind of they put a little hair on your nuts, and to make you appreciate when you get to the NHL and you're on a private jet eating filet, that life is very, very, very good.
So what was one of your first NHL stories that kind of would have you just going home at night chuckling? Because again, it'd be new to you when you finally get to the show, and first kind of bit of a shocker of a story coming home, or maybe it didn't shock you.
Well, just, I mean, of course, at the NHL level, guys are making quite a bit of money. And I spent that first year in the NHL up and down. I ended up playing 15 games. I was probably there for about 35, and had the chance to play with Evgeny Malkin, as I mentioned. So the following year I was at training camp, and they'd gone to the finals and lost to Detroit. And Malkin had an incredible season, hit all these bonuses in his contract. So I'm riding the stationary bike next to him, Rick, in training camp. And the PR guy at the time comes over and he drops off an envelope. And Gino, as we call Evgeny Malkin, as he's riding the stationary bike sweating, he peeks in and you could see a smirk on his face, and he puts it in the cup holder. And I said, Gino, I said, what is that? And he goes, chick. I said, check for what? And he's like, bonus. I said, show me. And he kind of like, and I said, come on, show me. And he handed it over to me, and I looked inside of it, just shy of $1 million. I couldn't believe my eyes looking at a check. I thought it was a phone number for crying out loud. It was, although they are 7 digits, but it was just shy of $1 million. And I said, oh my goodness, this is the National Hockey League right here. So that was a quirky story that I had.
What about you, Rick, the WHA to the NHL?
Well, just a little story about how kind of things progressed. And my last year in Buffalo, we were going to San Jose. It was San Jose's first year in the league. So we went out there about 4 days early. And of course, we had stopped initiations and the hazing and all that kind of stuff. So what they did was, if there was however many rookies they would take the whole team out for dinner, and they would pay for it. So we go to this nice restaurant not too far from the hotel, and there's LaFontaine, myself, Dale Howard, Chuck, and we're all there, and the whole team's there. We have 5 rookies, I believe, at the time. And so anyway, all of a sudden I look and I see a couple of guys are ordering Dom Perignon and like $300 bottles of wine. And I looked at Dale, talked to Dale and LaFontaine, and I stood up and I said, guys, be reasonable. Like, $75 bottle of wine is fine, but not 200 or 300. And anyway, at the end of the night, the bill still ended up being like, I think it was $8,000.
Oh my goodness!
So those five guys had to split that $8,000. But boy, it was a great meal. The shrimp were about that big.
Guys taking advantage of rookie party, that's a tale as old as time. The worst one that I heard was Chris Bourque, and I want to say it was in Boston when he got called up, and he was the only rookie. And they ended up racking him up for just shy of $25,000. One guy. He was the only rookie on that. Now his father's Ray Bourque, so I'd imagine he's probably got a nice trust set up. So I don't think too many guys are feeling bad for him. But the surf and turf platters, the expensive bottles of wine, the Louis I had a shot of Louis the 13th at my rookie party. It was in Chicago, but what do they call it? They called it a prairie fire. So they get me a shot of Louis the 13th with, I think it was over $100 shot. And they doused the rest of the glass in Tabasco sauce.
Tabasco sauce, yeah.
So I had to shoot this thing. I ended up going back over.
I got a good one for you.
Oh, Jesus. Light the campfire.
Darren Pang.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you work beside him probably a few nights a year. So when I was in Chicago, we're in Hartford, which actually was Springfield because the roof had we were in Hartford. And so instead of them buying us dinner, we said, okay, we're going to go to the bar and we're going to drink. And the rookies, I forget what it was, 15 minutes or half hour, would have to drink a shot of Jägermeister. So one of the guys was chewing tobacco and was spitting in a shot glass and happened to put it on the table. So the waitress comes over with a whole tray of Jägermeisters, puts them all on the table. Time to drink. Panger grabs that glass and swallows it. And I never saw a guy run to the bathroom so fast and puked his guts out for about 15 minutes and then came back and then grabbed one and threw it back and said, okay, I'm good now. And Panger, all about what, 5'7" maybe?
He ain't a big guy.
I don't know. Oh, he was a great guy, great teammate.
Oh, he's awesome.
Great
Oh my goodness, that is disgusting. I'd imagine there's a lot of people that are that might even be puking out their window in their pickup truck listening to this right now. That is next level, man.
Well,
Don't want to be drinking chew spit.
That's not a good one. Well, Biz, just in a wrap here, what's on the horizon for you? Like, are you going to be doing any traveling during the playoffs?
Well, so I got to call. What's that? What's that?
Before you go, I gotta take Whit on in a game of golf too.
Oh, hey, you any good? You any good, Rick?
I'm a 5.
Oh shit! Oh my god, I'm like a 25. Whit's probably like a 2 or 3. Whit's getting really good. Yeah, we'll have to do a sandbagger with you. We do these sandbagger invitational. But what's on the horizon is I got to call the Coyote games. We're going to be doing so at a Gila River in Glendale, Arizona. We're going to watch it on the Jumbotron and, of course, call the games that are happening in Edmonton. And then once if the Coyotes make a deep run, I'll be here. If they're eliminated at some point, I'm going to head over to Boston. We're going to get a bunch of live interviews and we're going to do a bunch of podcasts and just really be watching all this hockey. And I hope this thing gets off the ground because I need some form of entertainment and hockey does it for me. So we're going to look to expand on video content, more podcasts, and just like we talked about earlier, Rick, just keeping the mind busy.
Well, that's awesome, Biz. We want to thank you. You've been a great guest, some great stories, and loved having you on, and thanks for taking the time with us today. And best of luck going forward. And maybe we'll see you at the Sandbagger Open when you come up here.
Maybe you could carry Rick's bag. I don't know how good you are.
No. I'll be playing. I'll match up with you.
Oh, you're pretty good too.
Oh no. I'm about like you.
Okay, perfect.
You and I will be even.
That'll be a good match-off then. That's awesome.
But see, the difference is I'll get inside Whit's head. See,
that ain't hard. That he's a bit of a mental midget, but oh man, that's
you know what I mean. That's what age does to you. It gives you all that wisdom, and I know what things to say to get inside of his head and everything else. So, and I learned a lot of that when I played too.
I'll have him give you a noogie so he messes up your hair. Maybe that'll throw off your game.
Okay, well, guys, we want to give a big shout out and thanks to Paul Bissonnette, Biz Nasty, for coming on and enlightening us on the world of spit and chicklets and the social media world, which is a little above the heads of me and my partner, Squid. We're new to it. We're filtering it along. We're doing the best we can, but boy, oh boy, it's certainly taken a life of its own. And he definitely is a character, isn't he? We love this guy.
Gosh, I'll tell you, he's one of those guys that you just love because, first of all, he started in the ECHL and made his way all the way to the National Hockey League. He had to change what he was as a player to get there as well. And it's not easy for a lot of guys to do that, Mike. I mean, a lot of guys coming out of junior and they think, okay, I'm good enough. I'm this. I can just keep playing the same way. No, he realized that he had to do something different in order to move up leagues, and he did exactly that. And then after that, he's branded himself so well and done so well with the spit and chicklets and probably a lot of other things. He does the color for the Coyotes, and I mean, he's really branded himself extremely well and made himself one of the most popular people in hockey.
Well, what people don't understand, and I think this is the thing that, the little bit of insights we get to this is the fact that, not everybody, you're a first round draft pick, you're an underage 18-year-old player in the WHA, making good money and all that stuff. I mean, it's not all like that. I mean, it's more along the lines. As I've always said, if you take the top half dozen guys off every hockey club and you put the rest of them all on a hat, they'd probably come out the same on every hockey club. And if you look at it the way it could be like that. And I mean, you've played with a lot of guys over your years and you've run into a lot of guys who've just made it, hung in, up and down, all over the place. Brucey Boudreau is one of those type of guys. Would you say that Biz was probably the quintessential pro? I mean, he's honest about his talent, hardworking, appreciative for the opportunity. But the point you made, and I talked about this last week, was the fact that, you know, these guys have to go through expectations, reality, and survivorship. And the reality is the hardest part for these guys when they arrive at that rink for their first camp. And every guy in the room is the same as them.
Oh, there's no question. Reality sets in real quick where all of a sudden it's like you're looking around and you're going, well, I played against all these guys. They're pretty darn good. You know, I'm going to have to do something to make this team. But he fits in with a group of not all that many players that came out of junior hockey, let's say, that did what he did. You know, there's a lot of stubborn guys coming out of junior hockey that were, let's face it, a lot of guys in the NHL were always the best players on their teams growing up, all through minor hockey, even junior hockey.
No question.
But all of a sudden, you got to develop yourself in a different role in order to stay. It's one thing to get there, but it's another thing to stay and survive. Well, so he fits into a small, and I would say a very small group of players who realized that they had to do something else in order to advance and stay there for as long as he did, and make himself, well, he made himself a name in the National Hockey League too. I mean, that's the thing. He came out of the National Hockey League with, you know, most of the people in Canada knew who he was, you know, because he was also already on social media. He was already doing lots of crazy things. And, you know, so kudos to him because he fits into a very small group of people that were capable of stepping in and realizing that, yeah, you know, I'm a good player, but I got to do something more. I got to do something different if I want to stay here. And he did that.
Well, and the league's full of good players. So, you know, you've got, as you said, you got to find a way to survive.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
That's the whole thing. So I think one of the things I think that these guys have done, and they've done exceptionally, is given the NHL, and we touch on it in the interview with him about the branding. And I think the one knock on the players today is, you know, Sidney Crosby's so boring and he goes to the rink, skates, plays, eats dinner with the guys and goes home and plays video games. You know, these basketball players and all that, these guys are all pointing, banging their chests that they're the best and he's terrible, this guy's terrible, I'm this, I'm that. And they've never heard the word we. But as people say, that's great for them because they've made a brand for themselves. It's good for the game because everybody plugs in to see what these guys are going to say. And it's good for the NBA, whereas NHL is so boring. Like it's almost like they're crying out, please, somebody be a bit controversial so you can get us some airtime. So I think where these guys have taken it is that they are now letting players that, you know, I mentioned Scotty Gomez on the interview, guys like that coming on and telling the stories and expressing themselves as hockey players that people can relate to is given this whole new network of exposure to fans that the NHL has never, ever been exposed to before. And I would say that behind closed doors, they're doing cartwheels, that these guys are putting that out there and encouraging others to do the same, like us.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with that. Although, you know, I look at hockey players differently, and I don't know if I'm correct in the numbers or anything, but there's so many players from Canada, even from the US, that grew up in small towns. Some of them, like Matthews, Arizona. Imagine how much travel he did as a kid playing hockey and how much money it costs for him to play hockey all the way through.
Absolutely.
But he stuck with it, you know. And I think because most of the players, even Europe, they come from small towns in Europe, you know, and they're grounded. They grow up with good values, and I think that's what the National Hockey League is. And I, you know, nothing against the other leagues except they're different, you know, and they're big personalities. Whereas I think the hockey players, they want a little bit of privacy, and they don't want their pictures and videos all over the place when they're out eating or anything like that. They like to stay low key, and I don't have a problem with it. I'll be quite honest with you, Mike, because I mean, you know, the other leagues do enough of it. You know, we don't have to join in. I mean, it would be nice if there were a few more characters in the league. Yes, I totally agree that it would kind of spice up the league a little bit. But I wouldn't want to see them become what the basketball and the football and baseball players do, because I like the way they are. They're grounded, they got good values, and they go out and they entertain us every Saturday night and Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, whatever night they're playing. And so I like that.
Well, I listen, I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm all about, if you want entertainment, I'll go to a comedy club, as I've said before. But there's something to be said about social media exposure, and the basketball players have done an awesome job at that. And everybody's created their own identity in baseball, football, all the other sports, even tennis players to a degree. You've got golfers doing the same thing now. Like, all these other sports are all doing it. And I have no problem with the NHL themselves, but you're right. It's more, and I know I'll get in trouble with this one, but hockey's such more of a team first concept that, it's tough to get that out of the players. So for these guys expressing themselves, the retired guys, it's just bringing a whole new generation of younger fans to that demographic to appreciate what the guys have gone through. And I think, look, even Calgary's new arena, the proposal there is to put in a room for gamers that can play games during the game. This is what's happening. This is the way the world is going with. I mean, think about that. There's gambling. When I went to New Jersey, when I followed the Leafs, in-house gamblings. Williams Hill had an in-house gambling site. You can bet right on site. Well, you can't turn money over, but they give you a website, right? Like a app to go right there on your phone and take a rate on the spot. So, I mean, the world is changing all around us that way. Hockey does have to play catch up to a degree, but on this small scale that we're seeing with podcasts and being out there, this is the way the world's going. And I think they're embracing it, but they don't want the real characters, because hockey players have a tendency to police themselves, and that's never going to go away.
I think you're right. And, they're getting guys on for these guys have great stories. I got a ton of great stories from my past playing and everything. At times were so much different than they are now. So, going on their podcast and telling those great stories, funny stories is hilarious. And it gives people insight into what went on in those times, because they didn't know what was going on back then, because the visibility was not there that there is today. And, the other thing with today's players, you don't hear them talking about themselves on social media. If they're talking about anything, they're talking about a teammate, or the team, it's all about we. It's not anything about me. And I kind of like that, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I don't like people talking about, like there was a big stink about Hughes coming out saying that, he's the best rookie.
Yep.
And, he took a lot of heat about that. And, that's one of the things that you just don't do, and you don't see hockey players doing that. And that's one of the things I love about the game that I got to play at the highest level for 13 years, is that the people are grounded, have great morals, and they think we, not me. And we're in a me world right now, not we. We're in a me world. People come out of college, and instead of starting here at, where most people used to when you come out of high school or college back in the day, they want to start up here.
Yeah.
And they want to start there yesterday. Not in 5-10 years. They want it yesterday. And it's unfortunate that the world is becoming like that. But hey, I find hockey players different, and I like it.
Hey, listen, that's why they're the best in the world. And that's why we love the game. Games are going to be starting in a couple of days. As usual, time is not our friend, so we've got to take a wrap here. So, folks, we want to thank you again for joining us. You can reach us at Rick Vaive on Instagram. We are excited to announce that we now have a Twitter account, Squid ULF. So it's Squid Ultimate Leaf Fan, but our handle is at Squid ULF. everything will be posted there. Watch for updates on the Leafs, on, this day in history. We're going to be reporting some things, and we're going to throw all kinds of different stuff out there. We still have our Instagram account, The Ultimate Leafs Fan, Rick Vaive. Go to YouTube channel that we have, The Ultimate Leaf Fan. You can watch the video on this part also. So we got lots of ways to connect us. Send us some of your questions and your comments. Love to hear from you guys. We'll have a surprise guest again next week. Ricky's got one more thing he wants to say. And
I would like to do, now that we have the Twitter page and we're both on Instagram and everything, and people know we could put that out on our Instagram and our Twitter where the link that they could go. I'd like to do a show where we bring 3 or 4 guys on, where people can actually come in and ask questions. And they would have to go through a moderator of some sort to ask their questions to certain players. And I think that would be a fun podcast to do.
Actually, that's a great idea, and that's actually something we will discuss, and we will have that, and we'll have a pen, and maybe we'll throw it out there, and we'll discuss that for an upcoming show in the next few weeks. That's a great idea. Maybe once the playoffs get halfway through or around it, we can lots of comments on that. But terrific idea. But in the meantime, guys, watch for us. This will be out in a couple of days. It'll be out for a few days, pardon me, before our next one comes out next week. We'll talk to you then. Okay. Signing off.
All right.